Okay, imagine this for a second. You are absolutely starving, so you grab a handful of wheat from a field just to get something in your stomach. And suddenly, you're being accused of a crime. That intense moment, that's exactly where our story kicks off in Luke chapter 6. So let's dive into this visual journey together. We open on a series of intense showdowns. And these aren't just about breaking some old rules. No, they're about challenging the very meaning of right and wrong. And it all centers on the most sacred day of the week, the Sabbath. All right, let's start with verse 1. Get this picture in your head. Jesus and his disciples, they're walking through a field of beautiful golden grain on the Sabbath. His friends are hungry, right? So they just start grabbing the heads of grain, rubbing them in their hands, and eating the kernels. A totally simple human thing to do. But then, verse 2. Suddenly, a group of Pharisees show up. And I want you to really see them. Picture their sharp, judgmental stares. Hear their voices just dripping with accusation as they demand, "Why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" Now we hit verse 3, and Jesus, he is completely unfazed. He just looks at them and asks, "Have you not even read what David did when he was hungry?" Then, in verse 4, he keeps going with the story. Just imagine King David, a hero of their faith, walking right into the house of God, taking the holy bread that only priests were allowed to eat, and sharing it with his men. See? He's using their own history to make his point. And then comes the knockout punch in verse 5. Jesus looks them in the eye and declares, "The Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath." And as he says that, just for a second, picture a brilliant crown of light forming over his head, a clear visual sign of his authority over everything, even this sacred day. Okay, let's jump to verse 6. It's another Sabbath, but this time we're inside a synagogue. You can just feel the tension in the air. In the room, there's a man whose right hand is withered. I mean, picture it like a gnarled, dried-up tree root. Verse 7. The scribes and Pharisees are watching Jesus like hawks. You can practically feel their eyes burning a hole in him, just waiting, hoping he'll try to heal on the Sabbath so they can finally trap him. But here's the thing, verse 8. Jesus knows exactly what they're thinking. He looks right past them, locks eyes with the man with the withered hand, and says, "Arise and stand here." Imagine a spotlight just snaps on, hitting the man, pulling him right into the center of everyone's focus. So, verse 9, Jesus throws a simple but devastating question out to the whole room. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil? And you could hear a pin drop. It's dead silent. Verse 10, he looks around at every single one of them, then turns back to the man and says, "Stretch out your hand." And in that split second, picture the impossible happening. That withered, dead hand stretches out, and you see the flesh and bone reforming in a flash of light. It's completely whole. But now look at verse 11. The miracle is incredible, but I want you to contrast it with the faces of the Pharisees. Just see them turning beet red, their hands clenching into fists. They are absolutely boiling with rage. And that moment right there is a huge turning point. After these very public conflicts, Jesus makes a strategic shift. It's time to build his inner circle, his core team. Now let's go to verse 12. The scene completely changes. Picture Jesus all alone on a mountain. He's just a silhouette against this vast, star-filled sky, and he prays through the entire night. This is a moment of deep communion, of making a huge decision. And then verse 13. As the first light of dawn starts to break over the mountains, Jesus comes down. He calls all his followers to him, and from this big group, he carefully handpicks 12 specific men, who he also calls apostles. All right, verses 14 through 16, let's meet the crew. First, you've got Simon, who Jesus renames Peter, the Rock, and his brother Andrew. Just picture these two as tough, rugged fishermen. Then there's James and John, brothers known for their fiery tempers. We've got Philip and Bartholomew. Then Matthew, imagine him a tax collector, literally walking away from his booth full of money. And Thomas, the one who would later doubt. There's James, the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, a political revolutionary. And finally, Judas, son of James, and Judas Iscariot. And as we see his name, just picture a dark shadow falling across it, because he's the one who will become the traitor. So now his team is assembled. And Jesus doesn't waste a single second. He immediately gets to work, showing everyone what his mission is all about, healing and restoration, but on a massive scale. Okay, verse 17. Jesus comes down from the mountain with his new team to a level place. And there, waiting for him, is this huge crowd. Disciples and just a massive multitude of people from all over Judea, Jerusalem, and even the coast. Verse 18 tells us why they're all there.
They came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. I mean, even people who were tormented by evil spirits were being cured. And now for the incredible visual in verse 19. The entire crowd is pressing in, just trying to touch him, because power was literally flowing out of him. Imagine a visible energy, like waves of pure golden light, radiating from Jesus, touching every single person and healing them all instantly.
And now, standing there before this healed crowd and his new apostles, Jesus is about to deliver a sermon that will take the world's entire value system and flip it completely upside down. So let's start with verse 20. Jesus looks right at his disciples and says, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God." The visual? Picture a poor man kneeling in rags, and a magnificent, glowing crown is being placed on his head from above. Now, flip that for verse 24. "But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort." The image for this is a wealthy person, alone in a dark room, desperately clutching a bag of gold coins that are turning into dust and just slipping right through his fingers. In verse 21, he goes on, "Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied." Imagine someone who is painfully hungry looking up as magnificent, endless banquet just appears out of thin air right in front of them. Now, the contrast, verse 25, "Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry." For this, just see a smug, overfed person pushing away a plate of food, only to watch in horror as their entire table instantly becomes barren and covered in cobwebs. Now, for the second part of verse 21, "Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh." The visual here is beautiful. Picture someone crying, but as the tears fall, they're miraculously turning into sparkles of pure, joyful laughter. And the flip side in verse 25, "Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep." See a person laughing, mockingly at someone else's pain, as their own bright, colorful world slowly fades to a somber, sorrowful gray. And then verses 22 and 23 get even more radical. "Blessed are you when people hate you. For my sake, rejoice and leap for joy." The picture in your head should be someone being shoved out, rejected by a whole crowd. But instead of falling, they literally leap, impossibly high into the air, celebrating. And now, verse 26. "Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you." The mental image for this is a popular person on a stage, soaking in the applause, but the cheering crowd below them is slowly, eerily, turning into stone statues of false prophets. So, okay, if that's the upside-down kingdom, how on earth are you supposed to actually live like that? Well, this next section is the practical application. This is the how-to guide for this radical new way of life. In verse 27, Jesus lays down a crystal-clear command: love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Verse 28 builds on it: bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. And then verse 29 gives us this absolutely unforgettable mental image. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. See it clearly in your mind's eye. A fist swings, makes contact, and instead of fighting back, the person calmly, deliberately offers their other cheek. It's an act of incredible power that just shatters the whole cycle of revenge. In verses 32 through 34, Jesus basically says, look, if you only love people who love you back, or lend money to people who can repay you, so what? That's not special. Even sinners do that. The truly radical command comes in verse 35. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. The visual for this is a small, closed circle of people just passing gifts back and forth among themselves. Then, watch as that circle breaks wide open, and they start giving generously to strangers and even to their enemies with absolutely no strings attached. Okay, now for verse 37. Do not judge, do not condemn, forgive. Picture a person with their finger pointed in harsh judgment, and then just see them consciously lower their hand. And verse 38 follows this up with an incredible promise. Give, and it will be given to you. The image for this is just amazing. Someone is pouring a measure of grain into a basket, and as they pour, it magically multiplies. It gets pressed down, shaken together until it's overflowing the container and creating this huge, generous pile on the floor. And this leads to one of the most famous and, frankly, funniest images in the whole Bible, verses 41 and 42. Jesus asks, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? I mean, just picture this ridiculous, cartoonish image, a guy with a massive wooden beam, like a 2x4, sticking straight out of his own eye, and he's trying to perform delicate eye surgery on another guy's tiny speck with a pair of tweezers. It's totally absurd, right? And that's exactly the point. Next, in verses 43 and 44, Jesus uses a super simple farming analogy. A good tree doesn't bear bad fruit, and a bad tree doesn't bear good fruit. It's obvious. See a healthy, vibrant apple tree just covered in delicious red apples, sitting right next to a thorny bush that can't produce anything but sharp spikes. Then, verse 45 tells us what it all means. For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So now change that image. See words literally flowing out of a person's mouth, but they are shaped either like beautiful ripe fruit or like sharp, thorny branches. And now we've arrived at the grand finale of the entire chapter. Jesus is about to wrap everything he's just taught into one final, powerful story, and it's presented as a life or death choice. We start in verse 46, where Jesus asks the million-dollar question, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say?" Then, in verse 47, he describes the wise builder. This is someone who comes to him, hears his words, and actually puts them into practice. This person, he says, is like a man who dug down deep and laid the foundation on solid rock. Then, verse 48, the storm hits. Visualize a raging flood, a torrent of water just slamming against that house. But it cannot be shaken because its foundation is on the rock. And finally, verse 49. This is the person who hears the words and does nothing. He's like a man who just built a house on the ground with no foundation at all. And when that same flood hits his house, it collapses instantly. Picture it just disintegrating into a pile of rubble. The ruin of that house was great. And that leaves us with the final, unavoidable question that echoes from this entire chapter. It's a question for every single one of us who hears these words. So after everything we've just seen, after everything we've just heard, which foundation are you building on?